Hi everybody, it's your nerdy TA here. I didn't really get to finish going over a couple of things that I wanted to go over with you at the end of our lab, so wanted to make you a quick video to make sure that you have at least heard or have had someone walk you through the rest of that content. So the first thing that I wanted to make sure that you had reviewed was the histology of the respiratory system. And there's three things from your lab manual that you need to know. And the first one is the trachea. So if we take a look at this picture right here, the first thing that I want you to notice is that our lumen is right here in the middle. And this right here is really the dead giveaway that we're looking at the trachea. So I want you to recall that the trachea is a C-shaped ring of cartilage. There's really no cartilage covering the posterior side. It's pretty much just around the front in like a C sort of shape, and we see that here. So the cartilage that you see in these little, it almost looks like a darker purple here, that's going to be indicative of your trachea. Now this is something you're going to be talking about in the GI unit, but all of these stratified squamous layers, along with the muscle, this is your esophagus. So remember, makes perfect sense because this trachea sits anterior to your esophagus. So I want you to look for this trachea, your dead giveaway, and I want you to recall that the trachea is going to be lined with respiratory epithelium in the mucosa. So mucosa is the one that's closest to our lumen, right? So respiratory epithelium is going to be composed of pseudostratified ciliated columnar cells, and along the trachea, we're going to see lots of goblet cells that are responsible for secreting mucus. So that mucus lines the trachea, and it traps foreign debris, because you think about the kind of air we're breathing in Atlanta here. That's kind of nasty stuff sometimes. So the mucus makes sure that we trap some of that nasty gunk, and the cilia that's coating and lining the columnar cells will beat in a coordinated fashion, and basically it'll propel that mucus up to the pharynx, and we'll either swallow it or hack it up. Okay, so then let's go over here for a little bit of a close-up of a histological slide of the trachea. So here we see a nice close-up of the cilia. We see our nice big goblet cells in the epithelial layer. We see our basement membrane, and then our lamina propria down here. Okay. So really, no matter what kind of picture slide that you're shown or given, if you can look for these characteristic things, you'll be set. So boom, right here, look at all that cilia. It looks really fuzzy. So that's our epithelial layer. Then here we've got our lamina propria. Both of these are part of our mucosal layer, right? So this whole thing right here is like a close-up of our mucosa, the one that's closest to our lumen. There's our submucosa, and boom, there's that tracheal cartilage. Remember, the tracheal cartilage is going to be composed of hyaline cartilage. And a way that you can tell is it looks like these little googly eyeballs. It looks like these little googly eyes are saying hi to you. And so I want you to think of hyaline cartilage. Okay, so the hyaline cartilage are really, you want hyaline there because you want it to be rigid enough to support the trachea, but you want it slightly flexible enough to keep it open, and you want it to be able to change diameter during pulmonary ventilation, ever so slightly. The back of it, the posterior surface of the trachea is going to be made of elastic connective tissue and a band of smooth muscle. And really, you want smooth muscle in the posterior end so that it can expand when necessary, like when you're swallowing, you want it to be able to expand. Okay, so then let me show you just a couple of different pictures of trachea. So boom, there's our cilia. Here's our pseudostratified columnar epithelium. And here is our submucosa. So one of the things you do need to know are these submucosal glands. And these are also responsible for secreting a mucus-like fluid. Basically, someone asked me in open lab what the difference is between the mucus that the goblet cells secrete versus the submucosal glands secrete. And according to your textbook, the goblet cells are responsible for lubricating the surface here. And it's, the seromucosal cells are responsible for secreting a lubricating fluid, and the goblet cells of the epithelium are responsible for secreting a thick fluid that'll help trap the pathogens that the cilia will sort of move along. So here we've got our little hyaline cartilage saying hi to you. And here's another close-up, unmistakable, right? Got our cilia, got our big old goblet cells. That pseudo-stratified. It may look like stratified if you are taking a quick glance at it, but if you look where the nuclei are, you can tell that it's pseudo-stratified and not quite stratified. Also, you're really only going to see cilia on pseudo-stratified for a lot of these slides that we've studied. Okay, so the next one you need to know is lung tissue. And so for lung tissue, pull out your tag list here. So for your lung tissue, you're going to need to know the difference between alveoli, simple squamous epithelium, capillaries, bronchioles, simple cuboidal epithelium, and smooth muscle. So I want you to recall that we said the alveoli are mostly covered in type 1 alveolar cells, and they are going to be simple squamous epithelium. Even though there's actually more type 2 cells in alveoli, type 1, picture like a roll of dough, and you take a big rolling pin and you just smush it all out. So those type 1 cells are really squished, and they are really going to be covering most of your surface. And the reason why you want them to be so squished is that the primary purpose for those cells, so type 1, I want you to associate with simple squamous, which is very efficient and very thin. I want you to think, boom, gas exchange. Okay. So type 2 are going to look simple cuboidal. And they're really going to be sort of dispersed around the inner surface of your alveolus. And these guys I want you to associate with making sure you get a little WD-40 for that alveolus. So that cell is going to secrete pulmonary surfactant, and it's going to reduce that surface tension that you're going to create by constantly inflating and deflating that alveolus. Okay, so looking at these pictures we have here, can you tell which one is a bronchiole versus which one may be a blood vessel? So I want you to recall that terminal bronchioles are the very end of your conducting zone, and they terminate the conducting zone, so it makes sense, right? Respiratory bronchioles are the beginning of your respiratory zone. So terminal, terminate the conducting, respiratory begins your respiratory zone. And bronchioles, by definition, have no cartilage. They have no cartilage. And they're less than 1 millimeter in diameter. They're also going to be lined by a ring of smooth muscle, in addition to, as you get closer and closer to alveoli, cuboidal epithelium. Okay, and you're really going to see fewer and fewer cilia and goblet cells as you get closer to the alveolus, or the alveoli. But really, by the time you get to the respiratory bronchioles, you really see very few cilia and goblet cells, if any. So, so here is our bronchiole, and you can see that there's a big luminal space that's pretty much not filled like a blood vessel will be, right? Because pretty much air is going through these, and they're going to deliver the air to alveolar ducts and alveoli and whatnot. And this, number 2, is going to be your arterial blood vessel. And you can see that it's in this slide, it's stained a little bit lighter, but most importantly, you can see that there's quite distinct layers which is indicative of your various tunicas. So here's your tunica intima, very thick tunica media, and your tunica externa. And want you to keep in mind that, remember, blood vessels, especially in that tunica intima, are going to be lined by a simple squamous epithelial layer, whereas this is the side closest to the space is lined by cuboidal. So that's one of several ways you can tell. Here's a venous blood vessel, and remember, veins are a little bit more squished, and our arterial blood vessels have a much thicker tunica media. And then all of this white space around here, a lot of people think that when you cut into an alveolus, you'll see solid sort of circles, but really keep in mind inside the alveoli is air. So all you're going to see is this white space, so that's not going to stain, right? So we're going to see alveoli here in these little pockets. These tiny, tiny little pockets are going to be much smaller compared to your bronchiole. Okay. So here's another close-up. Oh, nope, this is a little bit farther away. So this is your bronchiole here. There's your arterial blood vessel. Here's some alveoli. Okay, and here is a different picture for us to look at that kind of shows us, here's a respiratory bronchiole. You can kind of tell there's really not, well, we can definitely tell there's no cartilage here. Bronchioles are not supposed to have cartilage, but by the time you get to respiratory bronchioles, you don't really have that as much smooth muscle as the terminal bronchioles will. It's a much, much thinner layer. And then you've got these alveoli, alveolar ducts, which are going to feed into the alveoli. They're kind of like open hallways that open into these alveoli. So here you can kind of see the different alveolar cells you're going to find. So here, the type 1 cells are, let's see if I can zoom in a little bit. Yeah. So you can see here, and I'm sure they're going to find you a picture that's a little easier to see than this, but you can kind of tell that based on where the nuclei are and based on how squished and flattened these cells are, these are going to be your type 1 cells, your simple squamous epithelial cells, and then the type 2 are much more cuboidal, and they're going to be much more dispersed, right? And so they're going to be secreting that pulmonary surfactant along the surface that faces the air. And these are just pockets of alveoli. And then, okay, so this is a dead giveaway that this is an alveolar macrophage. Alveolar macrophages are kind of like little Roombas. They go around and they just pick up dust and debris. Think back to macrophages from your lymphatic and immune system. Macrophages are these developed monocytes that are going to go and protect, and they're going to nom all the bad guys. So alveolar macrophages can be fixed, or they can be sort of free roaming, and they can roam across your alveolar surface and pick up dust, just like a Roomba. So in some textbooks, you'll see these cells called dust cells. These are macrophages. And that's pretty much all you need to know on that one. Okay. So here is a nice little close-up of your alveoli. Basically, when you're looking for capillary vessels, I want you to look for these red blood cells. Can you see how the red blood cells are these little concave discs, and they're stained slightly, it looks like a little redder, almost a little pinker in this stain. It's not quite bright red like you're used to, but still you can tell the shape, and you can tell that it's a little pinker than the rest of these. Okay. So you see this nucleus, you see that it's sort of jutting out and has easy access to the alveolar inner surface. This is going to be your type 2 alveolar cell, which is responsible for pulmonary surfactant secretion. Then over here, look how squished that is. So that is going to be our type 1 alveolar cell. Okay.